Hi, it's Chris Grimm. This is Deep Work Fast, where every week we drop a blog on Monday, and then on Tuesday, I come here live on LinkedIn and Facebook to talk with you about ideas, tools, concepts, books, anything that can help you to be the best that you can be in all the roles that you play in your life: boss, parent, partner, team member, all of it. So this week, the blog is about maintaining your integrity when your work environment is either toxic or unethical, or maybe it's just questionable. It doesn't feel right to you. And sometimes you feel like you have to potentially compromise your values, what you believe is right, to participate, maybe even to get anything done. So Heather's put the link there. Thank you, Mission Control, for you to read the blog. But let's just talk about this a little bit because I want to break it down. I've been coaching people for 28 years. I hear a lot of stories. And, it ranges from people who are in environments where it's just normal people doing the best they can. But sometimes the work environment isn't easy to get things done. And so people have to go around processes, go around other people. And sometimes that's rewarded, right? Because we need to get the stuff done. So oftentimes leaders will kind of turn a blind eye or look around certain things that are happening if in fact we're getting the outputs or meeting the goals that we asked for. And in some industries and businesses, toxic behaviors and really bad choices are actually allowed, encouraged, because again, maybe it makes us more profitable. Maybe it gets us more customers. Maybe it just pleases the board or the leader. There's a whole bunch of reasons why this happens. And I just want to tell you, in most cases, the people aren't inherently bad people, which is why I wanted to write this blog this week and I wanted to talk about it because it comes up all the time. And I wanted to break down for you the ways a workplace or a team environment can just be doing things that are not above board or are slightly not okay. And over time, that makes the whole situation potentially unethical or I know when I say that, people think of we must be breaking the law. And it doesn't mean that you're necessarily breaking the law to have a place where we're just not aligning with ethics and values. So let's just talk about the ways that that could be playing out. Maybe you could just think about it instead of just maybe turning this off or thinking, no, Chris, that's not the team I'm on. That's not the people I'm with. But just have an open mind and hear what I'm saying. I think the number one way that this tends to show up on teams and in companies is dishonesty. And there's a few flavors of that, actually more than a few, a handful of ways dishonesty shows up. One could be concealing or withholding information from other people on the team, maybe from customers, maybe from Wall Street if you're a public company, right? So concealing information. And sometimes that is really big, and sometimes it's just really small, like keeping certain data points, withholding that because we're not ready to show that data to someone. So I want you to think about that, right? Usually the intention behind what I just described is not malicious. People don't get up in the morning wanting to, oh, don't show them or don't give them that information. That's not usually how it plays out. It's usually more of kind of a making a call of, is this data ready for prime time? Or if we deliver this bad news right now, the downstream effects of that are going to cause all this drama or potentially create swirl, or leaders are going to get upset. And maybe the people in charge of that part of the business or this data believe that in a few weeks from now, we might turn something the right direction, or maybe in a few weeks, we're going to get that customer, we're going to close that deal, and these numbers are going to change. And so reporting them right now in the way that they are It's not helpful, so let's not do that. So that's one way dishonesty plays. And over time, if it happens all the time, it does become a problem. Another thing in the dishonesty category is fabrication of information, or sometimes what I call confabulation. It's where we make things up. Now, we as humans, by the way, want to tell stories. And so we often fill in the blanks very naturally. Most of us do it. We've learned to do it. And so in the workplace in particular, this can become a problem, specifically if we're filling in the blanks too much and too often, and then not going back and making sure that reality is replacing whatever it was that was a placeholder that we made up. So I want you to consider that about, how you and your team are functioning. How often are we withholding or concealing information? Not with negative intent, maybe with the right intent, but what's that getting us? And what is that doing to trust in with us and other teams? What does that do with our boss? Or anybody who might be counting on us to be completely honest and forthright. Also, I find that, yeah, of course, there are people who lie, but more often there are people who tell half truths or exaggerate things or embellish. So they're not telling a wholehearted, full on lie. They're just adding things or taking things away to whatever they're saying. So again, this is something that over time is a problem, because I know you want to trust people and you want people to trust you. And when a whole organization becomes okay with these practices, then we have not only individual issues in between people in pairs, if you will, but we start to have team problems. I've gone in and done interventions in organizations where I have whole functions of the business that don't trust each other. And this category of dishonesty and all the things I just described to you often are the reasons why. And again, most of the time when we dig down into what was happening, it wasn't usually like malicious intent. There weren't bad characters. There were just people making choices, and those choices ended up, unfortunately, damaging their relationships and their reputation. Let's also talk about exploitation, because that's a big word. And most of the time, people don't want to believe that's happening in their business. And that can start with bullying. And oftentimes, with professional grown adults, bullying doesn't necessarily need to look and feel like it does on the playground, where it's super overt and you can see it and you know exactly what it looks and feels like when someone's name calling, etc. But I think in business, it happens in more subtle ways. And so bullying sometimes can be even in email and text messages, not just when we're interacting with each other, but when we are in some way threatening people, when we're trying to coerce them to do something, and it feels uncomfortable for the other person, or when we are a person of power and we're using that power to force people to act maybe sooner than they're comfortable doing, or to do something that they didn't know that they were supposed to do, and now we're forcing to happen faster, better, differently. Right. So I want you to think about that, because in coaching, often when I'm doing 360 feedback for leaders and I am coaching someone who has a very strong, intense personality, and their style tends to be incredibly direct. And sometimes their voice gets louder when they're talking to people. When I interview people about them, often people will describe it as being bullied. And that's not, again, the intent of the person. The person might just want to get things done. You might be like this. If it's intimidating to the other people, etc., then it could be looked at as bullying. I also want to point out that in this section of what I'm calling exploitation, sometimes taking credit for other people's work, if that is something that happens on a regular basis, becomes toxic in the workplace. Now, if it's happening just between two people, most of the time that can be worked out just by a conversation or two. But again, if it's happening between functions in the business, if it's happening between teams, that can create a gap that will support siloing, which is something that is, in most organizations we see, and we can see what happens when it's working for us, when everybody's staying in their lane. But we know that it doesn't work when our silos are us kind of pulling away and not wanting to work with each other and staying in those lanes tightly and saying, stay over there, we're going to put a wall between the two of us, is not helpful, because most organizations need cross-functional collaboration to get things done, specifically when the issues or problems that the business has are complex, right? We can't just stay in our lane anymore in most cases. And so I want you to think about whether those things are happening in your organization. And then I also want to talk to you about some other ways that behavior can feel unethical or uncomfortable to people, causing people to question integrity. Favoritism is one of that. Favoritism is when we lean on the same people more often than maybe there are go-tos, right? And this is really common, by the way. So if you're a leader, I want you to think about this, because favoritism can get you in way more trouble than you realize. It also is limiting for you and the business, and culturally, it can create real problems, specifically when our go-to people are not necessarily using behaviors that are always really great. And I see it all the time. And then leaders make excuses for those people, making their behavior okay. Well, because they're a fave. Why are they a favorite? Because they deliver, they're loyal, right? They're a person that they trust. Maybe you worked together before. So if you are a manager or leader, I want you to stand back and objectively think about, do I play favorites, right? Do I maybe give opportunity or special projects to the same people over and over again? And if that's the case, and your answer to me is, well, of course I do that because the other people aren't as reliable, aren't as good, then my question to you as a leader is, why aren't you upgrading your team, right? You should have a whole team of go-to people. Wouldn't that be awesome? Okay, let's talk about other ways that the workplace can feel unethical, uncomfortable, or toxic. Overt fraud, right? That's when we are misusing resources. I have seen this happen with people who are clearly doing it intentionally, and they get caught and they get in trouble and they get fired. But I also have seen a lot of people who do it and they're not doing it intentionally to cause problems, or maybe they're just making a choice one day to write off a dinner on their expense report, or try to hook their family vacation to a company meeting so that their rental car can be expensed. Guys, happens all the time. So in organizations, when that happens on a regular basis and when it becomes the norm, it's a problem. It also can create something that looks and feels like discrimination, if in fact some people get away with it on a regular basis and other people do not, right? So you want to look for equality in the way your policies and processes are being deployed, the way they're being enforced, how you're holding people accountable, right? We want to do that in a way that makes the workplace healthy, right? I'm not being Pollyannish, by the way, nor am I naive about how real life works. I'm challenging you, whether you're a leader or not, to think about the workplace environment. And, it's really easy for people to tell me stories in coaching about how bad the workplace is. But oftentimes people aren't examining their contribution to whatever is happening. And so that's part of the reason why I wanted to write this blog, is because I wanted to make you aware of all the ways this happens, first incrementally and then as a dynamic. And I want to challenge you to do a few things. And when you read the blog, you'll see some of these. I'm just going to talk you through the things I think are most important, which is, if you want to stay in your integrity, you want to maintain integrity, regardless of the workplace, the people you're working with, etc., then you have to know what your personal boundaries and values are. And you have to anchor to those by ensuring that all day, every day, you are operating, what you do and say is within the bounds of those values and boundaries, right? Here's what I will do. Here's what I won't do. And as you work in a place, the longer you work in a place, I think it's even more important for you to revisit that on a regular basis, right? It's easy to do when we're new because we start to see the place and meet the people and observe the dynamics, and we're still kind of an outsider. But once you go native, that's what I call it, when you've been in a place for, maybe 6 months to a year, you may still feel like you're objective and you can see things differently and you're not behaving like everybody else. But most likely you are. And so I want you to really anchor into who you are and what those bounds are, not just in theory and in thought, but in your behavior. I'd also like you to see yourself as leading from any seat. And this is something any of you who work with me, you've heard me say it before. I believe every person can lead. And so I also believe that every person is contributing to the culture, the dynamics, the work functionality, the way the organization and the teams work. So whether we're actively engaging in good or bad behavior or not, if you're a part of the team and you are contributing every day in the workplace, you're a part of it. So if you're in a place and you don't love it, or it feels super toxic and you feel like you have to compromise yourself to work there, you should be asking yourself why. You can make money working somewhere else, I promise. So why are you staying if it's that bad? And if you say, well, I can't go anywhere else, I have to stay here, even though all of this is going on around me, then you need to take a look at your contribution. You need to look at what you are doing. And if you believe, if you're going home at night and you're stressed out, and I know for some of you this is true, and you lay down to bed and you close your eyes and you start to think, oh, like this is killing me. My boss is asking me to do this and I don't want to do it, but I have to do it. If that's the case, then you really need to look at yourself. You need to look at why you think it's okay to do those things. And you need to see what you can do to get it back on track. And if that's not possible in this place, you may not want to work there anymore. I know this is uncomfortable for some people because I talk to people on a regular basis, and a lot of people like to complain about work. But I'm talking about real situations where you are witnessing or a part of situations that feel super uncomfortable. I've had conversations with people where they knew what was going on in their company was against the law. And sometimes they just kept talking to me about it. And then after like weeks or months, I'm like, okay, you know that this is happening. Are you doing something about it? So the other thing on my list for you is to think about how you speak up, how you productively push back on whatever dynamics, processes, whatever policies might be going on that you believe are not only compromising potentially your integrity, but the integrity of the place, maybe even going against the organization's values. And there are productive ways to do that. And so I want to encourage you to think about that and think about doing it without a lot of drama, speaking to the people around you on the team that you trust, talking about it not in a gossipy way, because actually gossip and hearsay and complaining doesn't fix the problem. In fact, it usually makes it worse because it drives what I call like the drama train. And then everybody just kind of settles back into whatever dysfunction is there and gets their paycheck and takes their vacation. And it is what it is. And that's not great. That's definitely not excellent. And it is not the best you coming to work. So my suggestion to you is for you to think about what it would take to do the right thing. Oh, cameo appearance by Chastity. She wants you to do the right thing too. Think about what it's going to take to do the right thing. Lead from any seat. Have a conversation with people who are like-minded with you. Other people who see what's happening, wish things were different, want to function differently as a team, want the organization to feel different. Having those conversations without it having drama in it, like brainstorming, what could we actually do to shift this? How could we all show up differently together? And then having that conversation with your leader. It's going to take some courage potentially, but I know that you can do it. So It's 20 minutes. So I'm going to stop talking. Thank you for coming to Deep Work Fast today, watching these videos, supporting me. Thank you for the notes, everybody in the chat, for the suggestions, for blogs, and for Deep Work Fast. If you haven't read it, grab the link to the blog that Mission Control put in the chat, and I will see you next week. And I think next week is actually about how to disagree with your boss or other influential people in a productive way to get the outcomes you need. Okay, I'll see you next week.